Drummings which could be heard a long way from the house, children lifted up into the air, a Bible hidden in ashes, shoes flung at a man's head, chamber pots emptied onto beds, a horse with one of its rear legs forced into its mouth. All this typical poltergeist display in the home of John Mompesson, a magistrate of Tedworth, Wiltshire, from March 1662 to April 1663. Could these things be? Mr. Mompesson is a discreet, sagacious, and manly person, the scene of all being his own house, himself a witness in that not of a circumstance or two, but of 100, not for once or twice only, but for the space of some years, during which he was a concerned and inquisitive observer. And what interest could any of his family have had, if it had been possible to have managed it without discovery, to continue so long so troublesome and so injurious an imposture? Nor can it with any whit of more probability be imagined that his own melancholy deluded him, since, beside that he is no crazy nor imaginative person, that humour could not have been so lasting and pertinacious. Or if it were so in him, can we think he infected his whole family, and those multitudes of neighbours and others who had so often been witnesses of those passages? In these and such like instances, it is not to be conceived how tricks could have been put upon so many, so jealous, and so inquisitive persons as were witnesses of them. With these arguments, Joseph Glanville vouched for the veracity of the disturbances at the home of John Mompesson, after he had compiled from divers eyewitnesses and his own inspection the story of the drummer of Tedworth. The commotion started in March 1662 with the arrest of William Drury, a vagrant drummer who, quote, went up and down the country to show hocus-pocus, feats of activity, dancing through hoops, and such like devices, unquote. Drury was accused of using counterfeit documents to obtain money while traveling to Portsmouth. The local magistrate, John Mompesson, set him free but confiscated his drum. Drury had been a regimental drummer. From the time of Mompesson's taking away the drum, the strange phenomena at Mompesson's home at Tedworth commenced becoming more annoying after the drum had been destroyed. Early in the following year, Drury was apprehended at Gloucester for stealing pigs, but although found guilty, escaped hanging. Sentenced to transportation, he jumped overboard from the convict ship and made his way home to Uffcott, only a few miles from Tedworth. Here he bought a new drum and started beating it. Within 24 hours, Magistrate Mompesson had him seized and put in Salisbury jail. Drury was charged with practicing witchcraft, but was acquitted on this charge for lack of evidence, although several local gentry, including the parson, testified against him. On the original charge of pig stealing, the drummer was found guilty and condemned once again to transportation to Virginia. The first to comment on the Tedworth drummer was Reverend Joseph Glanville, chaplain to Charles II and a Fellow of the Royal Society, who went to Tedworth to investigate. The following extracts are taken from his Seducimus Triumphatus. The noise of thumping and drumming was very frequent, usually 5 nights together, and then it would intermit 3. It was on the outsides of the house, which, in most of it, board. It constantly came as they were going to sleep, whether early or late. After a month's disturbance without, it came into the house where the drum lay 4 or 5 nights in 7, within half an hour after they were in bed, continuing almost 2. The sign of it, just before it came, was and hurling in the air above the house, and at its going off the beating of a drum, like that at the breaking up of a guard. On the 5th of November, 1662, it kept a mighty noise, and a servant observing 2 boards in the children's room seeming to move, he bid it give him one of them. Upon which the board came, nothing moving it that he saw, within a yard of him. The man added, "Nay, let me have it in my hand," unquote, upon which it was shoved quite home to him. He thrust it back, and it was driven to him again, and so up and down, to and fro, at least 20 times together, till Mr. Mompesson forbade his servant such familiarities. This was in the daytime, and seen by a whole room full of people. Mr. Mompesson, perceiving that it so much persecuted the little children, he lodged them out at a neighbor's house, taking his eldest daughter, who was about 10 years of age, into his own chamber, where it had not been a month before. As soon as she was in bed, the disturbance began there again, continuing 3 weeks drumming and making other noises, and it was observed that it would exactly answer in drumming anything that was beaten or called for. After this, the house where the children were lodged out, happening to be full of strangers, they were taken home, and no disturbance having been known in the parlor, they were lodged there, where also their persecutor found them, but then only plucked them by the hair and night-clothes without any other disturbance. After this, it was very troublesome to a servant of Mr. Mompesson's, who was a stout fellow and of sober conversation. This man lay within during the greatest disturbance, and for several nights something would endeavour to pluck his clothes off the bed, so that he was fain to tug hard to keep them on, and sometimes they would be plucked from him by main force, and his shoes thrown at his head. And now and then he should find himself forcibly held, as it were, bound hand and foot, but he found that whenever he could make use of his sword, and struck with it, the spirit quitted its hold. The drummer was tried at the assizes at Salisbury upon the occasion. He was committed first to Gloucester jail for stealing, and a Wiltshire man, coming to see him, he asked what news in Wiltshire. The visitant said he knew of none. No, saith the drummer. Quote, do you not hear of the drumming at a gentleman's house at Tedworth? Ay, that I do enough, said the other. Ay, quoth the drummer, I have plagued him, or to that purpose, and he shall never be at quiet till he hath made me satisfaction for taking away my drum. Unquote. Upon information of this, the fellow was tried for a witch at Salisbury, and all the main circumstances I have related were sworn at the assizes by the minister of the parish, and divers others of the most intelligent and substantial inhabitants, who had been eye and ear witnesses of them time after time for divers years together. Two comments in Glanville's narration of the fantastic aerial drummings may be overlooked, and Glanville himself tended to disregard their significance. Whenever a weapon was employed as defense against the poltergeist, the drummer drew back. A stout fellow, one of Mompesson's servants, found that whenever he could make use of his sword and struck with it, the spirit quitted its hold. The human origin of the drummer is also implied in the account of Mompesson, who, seeing some wood move that was in the chimney of a room where he was, as of itself, discharged a pistol into it, after which they found several drops of blood on the hearth and in divers places of the stairs. Attention to such details, however, would have robbed the legend of its supernatural authority for Glanville, who thereafter became, one might say, the father of modern psychical research. John Beaumont, in his historical, physiological, and theological treatise of spirits, apparitions, witchcrafts, and other magical practices, says he was told the disturbances were committed by, quote, 2 young women in the house with the design to scare thence Mr. Mompesson's mother, unquote. Maybe Mompesson and Glanville were being imposed upon. A committee sent by King Charles heard no unusual noises. Reports of cannon and rifle shots and beating of drums in Yorkshire and Lincolnshire were widespread in 1658, 2 years before the Tedworth trouble. These alleged noises, however, were not linked to any individual, but their fame may have prepared credence in Drury, a true relation of a very strange and wonderful thing that was heard in the air, 1658.